The difference between a relaxed finish and a sharp stop pointing to the table is huge. It's not a gentle point, it's a forceful one. Today, we're covering a technique many amateur players use, the push rally. We'll cover how to improve the quality and variation of your push, and how to adapt your technique for different spins. Let's discuss why many pushes result in errors. The main reason is incorrect timing. Shuai and I will demonstrate a push rally. Notice that we're making contact with the ball at the peak of its bounce. Pushing the ball on the rise makes it very easy to make a mistake. Your push should be slow and controlled, not fast, unless you're playing a short push. If I want to play a short push or deliberately change the angle, then I can take the ball on the rise. Pushing at the peak of the bounce is more consistent. That's our first point. Second, during a push rally, focus on keeping your right foot forward. As you can see, all of our pushes are done with the right foot forward. If I want to prepare to loop, I must push and then recover. Every ball requires recovery. You recover to prepare for the next shot. If you intend to push several times in a row, you can keep your right foot forward to find the contact point, which helps you connect with the ball's power. Otherwise, you'll feel like you're out of position. Third, observe my pushing trajectory. The first key is my wrist, and the second is my direction of force. My wrist is in a dropped position. You must drop your wrist slightly for better control. You can adjust by slightly opening or flattening the racket angle. If you flatten your wrist, your racket face will be open, making it very easy to push the ball high. The second key point is that for any amount of spin, you must apply force in a downward direction. For example, if Shuai serves with heavy spin, I just guide it downwards without adding my own friction. I call this a guiding push, and even then, you must guide it downwards. For a slight spin ball, I'll brush it downwards with friction. Against a sidespin topspin ball, we would just hit it. Pushing into the net isn't necessarily because you're pushing downwards. Many short balls go into the net because you miss the contact point at the end of your stroke, or because your racket face is just pushing forward. Even against extreme spin, you must move downwards to control the arc. I can choose not to use friction. By not adding friction, I ensure I don't get affected by the spin and can just guide the ball over. During a push rally or a normal service return, your force should always be directed forward and down. Always keep the concept of down in your mind. Instinctively, when we see a high arc, we hit forward. When we see a low arc, we lift upwards. The main goal of your push is to keep it low, which gives you an opportunity when your opponent loops. No matter how much spin you generate, if the ball is high, it's a weak shot that anyone can attack. The key is to use the racket head to generate downward force. Some players ask about using the forearm. The problem with forearm dominant force is that against heavy spin, it's hard to control the arc and your feel for the ball isn't as clear. It should be the racket head leading the forearm down, not the forearm dominating the downward motion. Using too much arm power can make the contact feel too stiff, preventing you from gripping the ball. So let's focus on how to use the racket head. For example, when I return a backspin serve with my forehand, the power comes from the racket head, which is why the ball has so much spin. When pushing, the principle is the opposite. One motion brings the racket head up, the other brings it down. So how do you practice this? To get the feeling, keep your arms still and just focus on feeling the racket head generate the force, regardless of the push's length. I teach kids the same way. If you use your whole arm, you lose the sense of where the power is coming from, and your feel becomes unclear. So, immobilize your arm and practice using only the racket head. Try to feel this for yourself. The same applies to the backhand. First, I use only the racket head without engaging my arm, and then I add a little bit of arm motion. Your push will immediately become much spinnier. For instance, when I teach a child to generate friction by using their fingers, they often can't get it right. They instinctively use their arm. He'd say he understood the concept but couldn't isolate the movement. So, I had him hold his shoulder to keep his arm still and only allow a very small range of motion. That's how he found the feeling of using his fingers. When you use your whole body, you lose track of the power source. So, control your arm, use only the racket head, and you'll find the feeling instantly. Then, coordinate it with your arm's path, and you'll be able to execute a spinny push. Second, how exactly should the racket head be used to generate more spin? The racket head must point downward more to make the ball spinny. A push executed with this downward point will be both fast and heavy with spin. So for your backhand, regardless of your grip, try to have the racket head pointing towards the table at the end of the stroke. Give it a try next time. If your racket head finishes by pointing to the side or towards the lower side, that's incorrect. Make sure it finishes pointing at the table. The same principle applies to the forehand. After my backswing, I ensure my racket head points toward the table, which makes the ball low and spinny. Once you master using the racket head, everything else will fall into place, including your serves. I've realized that the most important thing in table tennis is the follow-through and stop. You have to stop the motion. If 90% of your stroke is perfect but you loosen up at the end, the shot is ruined. If the initial part of the stroke is correct but you relax at the end, the ball will have no spin at all. With that final snap where the racket head points to the table, how can the opponent loop it? The difference between a relaxed finish and a sharp stop pointing to the table is huge. It's not a gentle point, it's a forceful one. The same applies to looping. If your stroke is perfect but the finish is loose, you'll make an error. At the end, you have to grip it. This is how you generate power. At the very end of your stroke, use maximum power to grip your racket tightly and tense your arm. Don't let it wobble, become loose, or go soft. The end of the motion must be powerful. Remembering this one point should lead to significant improvement. This is the key to using the racket head. When I teach techniques, people often ask if they should use their wrist. The wrist does move, whether I'm flicking, pushing, or looping. But if you look closely without the racket, a flick comes from the fingers moving forward, a push from the fingers moving down, and a loop from the fingers moving up. It's all initiated by the fingers. It must be the fingers, not the entire wrist moving as a single unit. That leads to a loss of control. Absolutely do not flick your wrist loosely. Players who use a loose backhand wrist will find the ball flying off the table whenever they add power. Now let's cover how to push against different spins. Let's use some simple rules. Against a heavy backspin ball, you need to use a guiding push. Against this kind of ball, the more you brush it, the more it will go into the net. So you must guide it downwards. As I mentioned, you guide it downwards, not forwards or upwards. What does it mean to guide? It means you simply escort the ball over the net with minimal added action. This type of ball requires a guiding push. For a slight spin ball, you must add force, specifically, a short, explosive force. Use snappy force for these half-long balls. As the serve comes, I relax to find the ball, and at the moment of contact, my fingers apply force in a final, sharp grip. The feeling of this snappy force is very short and compact. Why can't you use full power on a slight spin ball? Because it contains elements of topspin and no spin, and too much force will cause it to fly off the table. So, for slight spin balls, use a short, snappy force. It's all about that feeling of a quick burst of energy. So what do you do when you can't read the spin? If you can't read it, push it to the side. Remember this rule: start with a vertical racket angle, then flatten it. If your racket is purely vertical, a spinny ball will go into the net. If it's purely flat, you'll likely pop the ball up. Therefore, start vertical and flatten on contact. Direct the motion towards the center line on my side of the table. Same for the forehand. Whatever serve he gives, I aim the motion inwards, towards the center line. At the very least, this will keep your ball low and on the table. When you're uncertain, you must use a neutral, middle ground approach. Avoid extreme upward or downward motions. This motion is very similar to a chop, where you also aim towards the middle of the table. The motion is to start vertical, then flatten, applying force towards the center. If you can't read the spin, should you push fast or slow? The more uncertain you are, the slower and more cautiously you should play. Because your slow pace also disrupts the opponent's rhythm, making it difficult for them to return. Use a soft touch, like using 4 ounces to deflect 1,000 pounds. When can you be fast? When playing a short push. For example, at 9-9, he'll likely serve short. In that situation, you must be aggressive and quick. The second time to be fast is with a long punch push, which is an old-school technique. A long punch push is used when you know your opponent well and can anticipate their serve. You can intercept their rhythm and surprise them with a fast ball. This term was used by old-school penhold players. Let's give it a better name, a quick long push. The difference between a heavy long push and a quick long push is that the heavy version is about adding spin. Often, if you push with heavy backspin, your opponent's loop will be very difficult to block. However, a quick long push has no spin. It's hard for them to add spin. This makes their loop much easier for you to block. The key to the quick long push is to take the ball on the rise and without any brushing motion, as friction would slow the ball down. A quick long push means keeping the racket close to the ball and sending it forward and down. This is a heavy long push, with added spin. This is a quick long push. If your opponent's loop is too spinny for you to block, you absolutely should not add more spin to your push. They will use your spin to generate an even spinnier loop. Third type, can you push a sidespin topspin ball? As long as the topspin ball is slow, you can push it. A fast topspin ball is impossible to push. But if the topspin ball is slow, you can push it by applying force from top to bottom, absorbing its energy. Bring your racket up and then chop down from its original position to absorb the force. Contact the ball on the rise and cut down on it. Keep the racket vertical and chop straight down. Honestly, the best way to handle this ball is to flick it. But if you're not confident, or if your flick will be easily countered, then you have to use this method. Keep your racket completely vertical, for both forehand and backhand, then apply force straight down from that position. This requires a very fast, explosive burst of power. Watch, it's this quick chopping motion. I once had a professional match where my opponent used a hook serve to my short forehand. When I flicked, he would counter loop down the line. I was always passive, so I started pushing it instead. If it's too difficult to flick, just chop it down. Guess if this chopped ball has spin or not. In reality, it has almost no spin. Because this stroke doesn't generate much of its own spin. It has a little backspin. Let me tell you about the most awkward types of pushes to deal with. One is the ball that seems to stop and come back. Have you ever faced that? The contact was so thin that when I prepare my loop, the ball dies and I hit the net. The second awkward ball is a high, easy-looking chance ball. You see it from a mile away, and then you completely miss it. The third type is the scooping loop. Have you ever faced an opponent who just scoops everything up? These scooping loops are incredibly spinny. They kick and curve unpredictably after bouncing, and they also have a bit of a kick to them. It's extremely frustrating. Many players who play away from the table aren't affected by spin. They hit a shot and immediately back up. We should cover how to deal with this another day.